Fatphobia or racism? What's worse in Italy? Welcome to Dan Fatales. So, I hope everyone watching this video can appreciate just how good this year's Eurovision Song Contest was. If you haven't watched it, then please, after you watch this video, go watch that, because as a weird, queer, fat and mixed race woman, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We had big girls, black girls, and strangest of all, Italy, my home country, actually won with a band that challenges gender roles. Now, I definitely don't expect you to understand just how culturally significant it was that a band that dresses like that and behaves like that could win. But it sets an amazing precedent in a country like Italy, which is insanely conservative and sexist and homophobic and racist and fatphobic. Especially at a time when in Italy they are currently fighting for attacks on LGBT people to be considered hate crime. Because of course it isn't yet. Basically it means a lot. Now that being said, when compared to the rest of the Eurovision and the representation that we saw, as wonderful and progressive as Måneskin are, they are still four very beautiful, very skinny white artists, which says a lot about Italy's priorities when it comes to who they send to represent them, or more pertinently, who's acceptable to be unacceptable. The representation of different bodies and genders that other countries send to Eurovision reminded me how much better I would have felt about myself growing up in Italy if I'd seen someone like Destiny wearing the same kind of costumes that skinny ladies are supposed to wear. If a love song like Daddy's 10 Years had been openly written for someone like me, maybe I would have felt like I deserved love rather than accepting that I would always be considered inferior because of my size. If any non-white person had been shown in a positive or even neutral light, like how Sweden and the Netherlands sent refugees to represent them, then maybe I would have felt legitimized as a mixed-race woman in Italy. And if a band like Måneskin had been called cool instead of Froci, maybe I wouldn't have believed that I was heterosexual up until I was in my late 30s. There is hope now, but we cannot get complacent. We need to remember where we come from so that we can keep striving forward. Because I still remember all too well what it was like to grow up in Italy as a queer, mixed-race fat kid in the 80s and 90s. And the problem is that these kind of prejudices, this hatred, is just the established normal. People don't think twice about insulting immigrants or gay people or fat people. It's just as normal as saying hello. But that doesn't mean that it's right. Italy is a country in a desperate need for a political and cultural shake-up for what concerns diversity and acceptance. Even as someone that has lived abroad for more than 20 years, it's hard for me to realize just how institutionally wrong is the way that Italy treats any variant from the norm. And what a strict definition of normal it has. Ciao, ciao, buongiorno a tutti! Incominciamo con lo show. In 2015, researchers asked photo editors from magazines around the world to Photoshop an image of the same woman into the ideal beauty standard of their country. And these were female editors, so we cannot put all the blame on the male gaze. Italy had one of the skinniest results, second only to China, an impossibly skinny rendition of what Italians think women should look like. Like the Italian vallette or showgirls introduced by Silvio Berlusconi on his private TV channels in the 80s. And these weren't television shows for adults, they were daytime, afternoon family programs. Imagine The Chase on ITV, but all the brainiacs are models in bikinis. No, literally. This issue is endemic in Italy. The racism, the fat phobia and the misogyny. And yet, from the outside, all anyone thinks of is pasta, pizza, Sophia Loren, the great architecture and art. Like American TV, which exports television shows in English, the way marginalized groups are so brazenly talked about on live television never makes it out of Italy. Because it's only Italian. If this show broadcast in English in the UK, there would be an uproar. Of course, that doesn't mean that other countries like the UK and the US are innocent. From American supermodels to the heroin chic of the 90s in the UK with models like Kate Moss, Skinniness has been promoted as an ideal of beauty standard in culture globally, with fatness in the media most commonly used as a comic relief, as can be seen with actresses like Rebel Wilson. The existence of a standard of beauty commonly regarded in pretty much the whole world as thin, light-skinned, able, virile for men and delicate for women, without any option beyond cis and hetero, shows the intersectionality of the issue and how exclusive it is, to the point of representing an exceptional minority of the world population, despite this standard being sold as, if not the norm, the absolute aspiration, despite the enormous erasure this brings. Fundamentally, everyone is badly affected by answering and comparing themselves to a standard in personal terms, and yet this is how culture and society paragon and value every human being. And this shows even in the internal layers of minorities who face discrimination from the norm. Colorism is what was already in colonial times judging traits as beautiful in black women by comparing them to a European standard of beauty for skin tone and features. A similar occurrence, if you think about it, is what happened for Tess Holliday. She was hailed as the first plus-size model under contract with a popular model agency. Tess's face particularly was still hailed as particularly beautiful, because in comparison to her actual body, her features adhere to a skinnier standard of beauty than a size 22 would be expected to be. And notoriously, as the first and only book published in Italy is named after, every fat girl knows what the beautiful face compliment means for that fat body. The opposite of a butter face. We are all held to an arbitrary standard that is not reflective of the majority of the world population. And yet, we've been convinced the standard is real. And since it is, I wonder, what system benefits from making every and anyone feel inept and not good enough so that they will work and buy constantly to try and reach that golden standard that they made up from nothing? Right, capitalism! If on the surface the requirement for beauty of women seems to be just functional to the use and consumption by men, there is a darker political truth behind it, where keeping women working on themselves, demanding beauty as a currency on top of skills, made sure that as a category they could never compete and stand a fair chance compared to men in a supposedly meritocratic system. Because whereas fatness in a man does not preclude his growth of status, both social and economic, women are demanded to deliver on top of skills an image of beauty, promoted and supported by the same bootstraps lie capitalism is based upon, where therefore not achieving standard expected beauty means a lack of quality, of temperance, of work, of skills, of ability, of care, and that defines the person. If you don't make the effort to lose weight, to put on makeup, to buy and do all the things that supposedly will make you achieve the body you deserve, then why should you be considered for that promotion? If you are too lazy to diet, you're too lazy to deliver the work needed at a higher level, for sure. It's not by chance that the higher in the corporate hierarchy a woman gets, the more her looks have to adhere to a masculine standard. And the higher the paychecks, the lower the calories ingested. Yes, really. It's not by chance that the stereotype of the ugly feminist was resurrected in the 80s, like it was during suffrage, whereby depicting someone fighting for women's equality as masculine, unshaved, unfeminine caricature is sought to punish women for their public acts by going after their private sense of self.
I'm feminine, not a feminist, says a college senior in a Time magazine report. I picture a feminist as someone who is masculine and doesn't shave her legs, and is doing everything she can to deny that she is feminine.
Too many young women do not realize that others depicted a feminist in that way, so that they would be sure to respond the same way and would work relentlessly towards the opposite, seeking to deliver a standard of beauty that requires so much time and effort that would guarantee them not to have time to still protest and rebel, find the time to march, make and distribute pamphlets to denounce the patriarchy. The beauty myth is not about women at all. It is about men's institutions and institutional power. The qualities that a given period calls beautiful in women are merely symbols of the female behavior that that period considers desirable. The beauty we are told we should seek is always actually prescribing behavior and not appearance. At any given time in history, women had to be subservient to men. And you know what? It showed in matter of food. At the time my grandmother and mother made the meal, they prepared it according to what my grandfather wanted. He ate, and then just afterwards, the women would eat his leftovers. Putting on an arbitrary value on how little a woman eats, represented by how thin she is just perpetuating the same idea. A cultural fixation on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience in the face of the simplest of survival instincts, hunger. So, where did this all begin? In Italy, slender women with medium to large breasts and a skinny waist and narrow hips are considered the most beautiful. There is no thick and juices, no big booties, nobody's milkshake is bringing anyone to the yard. But the body type of heroin chic, we basically invented that. By the end of the 1970s, sizes started to shrink. By the 90s, we had essentially Barbie doll-sized idols like Martina Colombari, with long legs, flat bellies, small breasts, and tiny waist. Such was the change of standards that the judging panel for Miss Italia had to change their size requirements and abolish the 90-60-90 rule, leading to an onslaught of anorexic and extremely underweight contestants. This wasn't just apparent in beauty pageants, though. In the 70s, a new genre of film came onto the market called the commedia sexy. I suppose you could say it was our version of the Carry On films in the UK, except there were no double entendres. It was blatant. This genre of film was founded on the objectification of young women, with plots about older men trying to sleep with them. And we laughed at them, made heroes of them, the men, that is, for their success in sleeping with these women through coercion. The actresses themselves were considered nothing more than pornographic prostitutes. Italy being very Catholic, of course, but that doesn't mean that they weren't rewarded for that degradation. Many of them made it out of the pit that was the commedia sexy and onto the mainstream television, as one of those showgirls used as arm candy by the presenters in the 80s. These girls would appear on daytime television never wearing more than a rhinestone bikini, leaving me growing up to believe that outfits like that were a status symbol of poshness, not only with a cost barrier that would prevent me from ever wearing something like that, but also a barrier of wearability, where if you didn't look like them, you weren't allowed to. This idolatry and coveting of thinness didn't just turn skinny women into objects of desire. It also had the opposite effect of making fat girls objects of disgust. And as a fat and mixed-race woman in Italy, representation of either of those things was either completely absent or very negative, and God forbid being both. This was reflected most acutely in the fact that no clothing store that I ever went to in Italy had anything above a size 12 UK. Well, unless it was a specialty store aimed at mature lady, the nonnas. Imagine what it's like for a teenage girl who is already viciously bullied to then have to wear the kind of clothing aimed at women 50 years old and older. Because the only time fatness can be conceded for a woman is when she is no longer useful for procreation. If non-whiteness is conceded, it's only in the colorism of the North-South divide in Italy. Don't get me wrong, paler is still better. But being Southern Italian is still better than being black. Italy's issue with darkness go back to the Second World War. the fascist law of Benito Mussolini to defend the race, and with the post-war migration from southern Italy. The modern Lega Party in Italy was originally called Lega Nord, and its aim up until the 90s was the secession of North Italy as its own sovereign state, to separate itself from the darker, less favorable South. We even have our own slur for Southerners, terroni, which is a derogatory term used to describe Southerners as having negative personal characteristics, such as laziness and ignorance, remind you of something, and whose presence in the North is regarded by some as being analogous to those of North Africa descent, like me.
In the wake of the Italian unification, the people inhabiting the formerly Bourbon kingdom were in fact racially stereotyped, thereby fostering feelings of northern Italian supremacy over the southerners. According to Lombroso, facial features like black hair, slight beard, bigger lips, and longer nose were signs of such foreign contamination, and directly correlated with a natural predisposition to delinquency. In 1937, the Second Italo-Ethiopian War led to the implementation of the first fascist laws, which promoted explicit racial discrimination. These were the laws against madamato, that is, the concubinage between Italians and African women in occupied territories. The penalty for madamato was from 1 to 5 years of prison. The church endorsed the laws which stated that hybrid unions had to be forbidden because of the wise, hygienic, and socially moral reasons intended by the state. The inconvenience of a marriage between a white and a Negro, plus the increasing moral deficiencies in the character of the children.
Living in the UK, I'm always astounded by the level of success that actresses that are not conventionally beautiful and not particularly thin can achieve. Someone like Olivia Colman, an Oscar-winning actress, would have never been allowed on Italian TV. She definitely wouldn't have been the main love interest for a main character like Mark and Sophie in Peep Show. Don't get me wrong, we would definitely have had someone like Mark, but he would have pursued someone more like Nancy, not Sophie. The closest we ever got in terms of talent was Laura Morante, who was a dancer, so you at least have to have a body like that to offer at the altar of beauty to sacrifice. We did have one young fat actress, Nadia Rinaldi. Born in 1967, she was often portrayed as the obnoxious wife that only existed for the husband to cheat on. And she would only be the wife because her family was rich, because clearly no man in his right mind would marry someone like that. The joke was always on her, but she was the villain, not the victim. If you're fat, your role is comedy, and even then, you're to be laughed at, not with. By the way, while looking for information about her, everything in Italian media is littered with her weight loss, as if that's the only thing that she's known for after having a gastric band in 2001. Throughout the 90s, she never had a role that wasn't just the fat woman to laugh at, whether because she couldn't put down food, or whether because she was too horny, but of course, what man would ever want to touch her? On the other hand, you have someone like Mandela Tide, of German and Indian descent. She became popular due to her role as the young love interest of the titular character Sandokan in the 90s sequel to the German television show. She was the closest I ever saw to someone with exotic traits like mine on television, but even then, not similar enough to justify my existence. Her exotic traits were in her heritage, not her skin color, and of course, she had the body of a model. And by the way, I know that I am white passing now. I wasn't as a child. Even my mother called me mulatto. You'd be forgiven for thinking that, hey, maybe mixed race, then it's fine if you have a model's body. But then Miss Italia 96 happened, and that's when I realized that I had to get away from Italy as fast as I could. Dani Mendez was a model from the Dominican Republic. She won Miss Italia and then went on to represent Italy in the Miss Universe pageant and placed 6th. Unfortunately for her, she clearly crossed the line for what is considered acceptable to Italian society. Whereas Mandala was exotic but still could be white passing, Dani was unmistakably a person of color. Miss Italia was televised over several days, and even before she won, the media started to discuss societal consensus as whether Miss Italia could have dark skin. Even one of the judges weighed in. Photographer Bob Krieger, who decided that she could not.
A black girl cannot represent Italy because the women of this country have white skin. And to elect today a black queen would be too ahead of times. It would actually be a gift to those who want to show that we bend to the extracomunitari, and so it would be right to split Italy in two.
And this was completely normalized and justified in the minds of Italians are white. And therefore, even if you have Italian citizenship, but you're not white, well, then you're not Italian. In her case, despite having an Italian passport, she is still first referred in the media as Dominican. Even her Wikipedia page says so.
Her election as Miss Italia on the 7th of September 96 in the Italian town of Salsomaggiore caused a minor scandal throughout that nation. It was the first time that a woman of non-Italian ancestry was elected to represent the country in an international beauty pageant, and some Italian citizens saw it as a wake-up call for Italy to close its borders to further immigration. 2 members of the judging panel were suspended for saying that a black woman could not represent Italian beauty.
Oh, and by the way, if you thought, well, this was 25 years ago, so clearly things must have improved. Osere Mangano, half Italian, half Nigerian. She competed in Miss Italia in 2015, and this is the level of comments that she received.
Sorry, I'm not racist, but the fact that a woman of colour could become Miss Italia worries me a lot. At a time in Italy when in classrooms we have more foreigners than Italian children, like it should be instead, a moment during which we are being invaded by Africans coming to our coastlines, I don't think it will be appropriate to let a foreigner win. I don't want to be racist, but Italy is made of Italians who have a wealth of history and culture that wouldn't be fairly represented by foreigners.
But back to 96, in response to Danny winning Miss Italia, the Lega Nord, a far-right party that to this day is the main inciter of racism in Italy, and that in the 90s actually considered Southern Italian as African aliens, launched their own pageant, Miss Padania. The girls participating in Miss Padania would promote a model of beauty typical of the northern regions. I'm not joking, we're going Aryans here. To give you a bit of context to what the current Lega party was doing in the 90s, at the time they were campaigning for the secession of the north of Italy into its own country against thieving Rome. And they were doing it with compelling arguments such as the Lega is always hard.
Ma la Lega Nord ce l'ha duro! Duro!
They meant their appendages. For real. Today it's just called the Lega Party with its Capitano Salvini on top. They still promote Italy first, probably hoping that people from South Italy forgot that they weren't considered Italian by the Lega just a couple of decades ago. Fun fact, the term celodurismo, having hard-ons, came to define a presumptuous and arrogant approach in politics, officially part of Italian dictionaries even today. In case we didn't get otherwise how sexist the far-right movements are to identify their political party with hard-ons. And just to make sure that people weren't getting the idea that being fat was better than being non-white, Elisa Dospina, she's an EU size 46-48. She became a model in 2007 and to this day is the subject of ridicule, hatred and fat phobia, usually at the hands of skinnier models and television presenters. They use the word curvy as a euphemism for just her not going to the gym. And there was even drama between her and another model who accused her of stealing modeling jobs from women who work hard for their bodies. Literally, they took our jobs, but for fat people, not migrants. And she's not even that fat. In UK sizes, it's a 14-16. In 2016, she was added to the jury panel of Miss Italia. And at that point, it was possibly not by chance that Paola Torrente, a size 46, which is a 14, got second place on Miss Italia. Well, you can imagine how well that went down. The mother of the third place said that she shouldn't have participated at all. She should have participated in its own Miss Italia Plus curvy pageant. Plus size, for a UK size 14. Just so we are reminded, she literally has the average body size of the UK, but she shouldn't have been allowed to participate at all. So whether you're fat or non-white, you're just not considered Italian enough. What if you are both? Well, you were me, so I had to run away. The cult of thinness is relatively recent. I mean, just look at Renaissance painting the Venus de Medici, the Michelangelos, and Rubens painting. Side note, I think that after 2020, we can all appreciate lying down on the sofas with our boobs hanging out. Mood, girl, mood! Even going back to fertility idols, fatness has historically been considered a positive attribute. And this kind of makes sense, right? I mean, if we go back to the days of the cave woman, then a curvier woman would be evidence of her ability to sustain a child, while in the last 1,000 years, fatness was a symbol of affluence, that you had the money to be able to afford to feast. And then the slave trade happened. The English and much of Northern Europe grew a fascination for classifying races and what defined European superiority.
Georges Louis Leclerc articulated a new physical identity for black Africans, who he claimed could be defined by both their dark skin and their enormity. The plumpness was evidence of their ease of circumstances and their idleness. The land that they inhabited was rich, and for this reason, black Africans were able to stay well nourished with little or no effort, which made them well fed, but also simple and stupid.
And Dr. Alex Stewart agreed.
Responding to a question about the cause of sleepiness after a meal, he conflated sleepiness and laziness and claimed that this predicament was caused by a lack of reasoned self-management, adding that the problem of post-meal lethargy was endemic in hot climates, which makes the inhabitants generally lazy and inactive.
As black people became more present in Europe, what did the white supremacists need? Well, a way to separate themselves, the Anglo-Saxon, from the savages at a glance. And so, along with dark skin, their enormity, read curves, especially for women, became linked to laziness, slow-wittedness, which people like Leclerc and Stewart decided was facilitated by the warm climate and richness of food, which therefore made the inhabitants of Africa lazy and inactive. Black women specifically started to be considered beautiful only if they showed traits recognized as beautiful in white women.
Francois Barnier certifies black women's attractiveness by using the existing standard for white women. Aquiline nose, small mouth, coral lips, ivory teeth, large bright eyes and gentle features. Black women who were good-looking could lay claim to the title only because of their similarity to the neoclassical ideal of Venus.
And hello, colorism! So, if fat is black and black is immoral, how to make sure that distinct intellectuals are at a glance recognized as higher and better? Most importantly, since the idea that feminine beauty reflects the nation's moral compass as well as its racial caliber became current in the 16th century with images like "I take Wales as one against Italy." Cool, I agree with that. Most importantly, since the idea that feminine beauty reflects the nation's moral compass as well as its racial caliber became current in the 16th century with images like Marianne for France and Britannia for United Kingdom, how do we remove any evidence of gluttony, which was a black trait, so beneath the high white classes, from the white women? Dr. Chain in the UK advised his female patients not to only fast but also to purge. And welcome bulimia since 1734. And because Anglo-Saxons love to define themselves not for their actual merits or qualities, if they had any, but just in opposition to something or someone they didn't like, by the time women's magazine defined fashion and therefore aesthetic beauty in America, their exceptionality was to be slender. Even more slender in the American edition than the original European Anglo-Saxon, because they were purer due to the temperance that religious Puritanism showed in keeping away from food. To the point that women had fertility issues because guess what? Fat is a function of estrogen and fertility. So with this highest form of moralism based in religious asceticism, aka fast to bring upon a moral judgment to fatness associated with black people, came the judgment of food and drinking itself as something that would lead to it. And you wonder why fat girls don't feel like eating in public? But back to Italy. In Italy, up until the 19th century, stocky, dark women were still seen as beautiful, as exemplified by La Bella Rosina, the mistress and morganatic wife of Vittorio Emanuele II, the first king of unified Italy. And yet, things were about to change because of a man idolized in Italy to this day, who, reading through the history of, happens to be the father of fascism, the personal inspiration for Mussolini, and male chauvinist originator of the modern Italian male gaze. Gabriele D'Annunzio. Fascinated by English beauty, represented by the pre-Raphaelites, D'Annunzio promoted the idea of beauty intrinsically related to fair, skin pallor, slenderness and fragility, establishing the foreign reference of light roses and male complexion, imported from England, as the standard Italian women were to be compared against. He conveyed the idea that feminine beauty existed only if confirmed by the stimulation of the male desire, making his femme fatales mere instruments of pleasure for the male protagonist of his novels. He promotes diaphanous beauties deprived of fullness and strength, a sterile body that does not exist for procreation but just to satisfy a man's carnal desires. In his Il Trionfo della Morte, Ippolita's beauty is said to come to excel when she will die, cause that will emphasize even more her slim slenderness and bloodless pallid complexion. She is described as an instrument of pleasure, as a magnificent and lustful animal. An animal. To adorn a table or cheer up a bed for the male protagonist. And yet, ironically, when the same protagonist goes in search of energy and renewal, he does so in the lower classes, described as darker, with fervor directly opposing anything that could be considered deathly. D'Annunzio is the one who presents the very concept of fetishization in the desire for Favretta, a girl that is described as the complete opposite of Ippolita, as short, brown as an olive, with robust features and a wide, generous bosom, curly hair and thick eyebrows. And yet, it goes to the peasant celebration, considering them the lowest stratum of his race, revealing in the same breath the disgust and low opinion, and yet desire and fascination with this girl, who by opposing to his main heroine and lower in all traits, he lusts for, and yet he deems lower and primitive at best. He actually recoils, realizing that he hates these people, these masses. Then again, if Ippolita was at best a magnificent animal, maybe the point was that D'Annunzio just saw women as a whole as inferior things to toy with. And toying his protagonist does. He leaves Ippolita to go and experiment with the lower classes, and went back to Ippolita, her self-confidence broken as now she is taking the sun. Because in her pallid, sickly perfection, seeing Aurispa, the protagonist, has gone to this little darker girl, she now wants to become truly, like he says, like an olive. Neither of these women could be enough for D'Annunzio's protagonist. Too tall, too short, too slender and pallid, too curvy. He just seems to want to find an excuse to justify treating them as inferiors, as animals. And even to Ippolita, the supposed hailed beauty, without recoil or regret, she doesn't get the human treatment. Aurispa gives the quintessential fetishization declaration about her, admitting how he objectifies her just in function of himself.
How many guises does she have before my eyes? Her form is designed by my desires. Her shadows are produced by my thoughts. Whenever she appears before me, it is purely as an effect of my continuous internal creativity. She does not exist except through me.
By the way, this is reflected in his real life and treatment of his great lover, the actress Eleonora Duse, who at the time of their affair in 1900 was much more famous and influential than D'Annunzio, and yet he believed that he could subordinate her to his creative genius. She was renowned for her repertoire of gestures, and she used her hands extensively to convey emotions. And what does he do? In the play that he writes for her, La Gioconda, he forced her to conceal her arms in most of it. And this, even at the time, was recognized generally as a sadistic act towards the actress rather than a real dramatic requirement. In his novel Il Fuoco, The Fire, The story tells a thinly disguised account of their affair, and yet he deliberately contrasted the two protagonists to flatter himself. His male protagonist is a vigorous young poet of unlimited talent, while Duse's alter ego is a famous actress in her early 40s who is aging and desperate, portrayed as a tyrannic and yet pathetic and submissive and jealous woman, despite her being only 4 years older than him. Even one of the most beautiful and famous talents established in Italy, the soprano Maria Callas, had to deal with the consequences of what misogynistic D'Annunzio imposed on Italy. When she started her career, she was 173 centimeters per 100 kilos. In 1951, she is sent to a famous tailor in Milan, Bichi, who is quoted saying,
"If I were to dress a woman this fat, I'd go insane. She's so disproportionately fat that anything she wears cannot flatter her. We couldn't honour the central roles of a woman so charming if the lady couldn't first lose some weight." When her producer during a lunch break reprimanded her for eating too much and allowing her weight to become a problem, she was still able to protest that she wasn't so heavy, daring to say that she was challenged to put the matter to test by stepping on the weighing machine outside the restaurant. The result was somewhat dismaying, and she became rather silent.
After those events, she started a fight with her own body that dragged her at times to weigh 54 kilos with methods to this day unclear. Whether it was urban legend that she had to ingest a tapeworm, or whether, more realistically, she accepted injection directly in her thyroid to raise her metabolism, bringing along depression that became a constant in her life until she died at 54.
It was a dangerous treatment because it affected the central nervous system and changed her metabolism. But she turned into a beautiful swan.
And all of this for what? Her career as a soprano was actually negatively affected by this. The loss of body mass made it more difficult for her to support her voice, triggering the vocal strain that became apparent in later years, in the 50s. Oh, but do you want to know where Bichi, the famous tailor that started to know where her confidence came from, being already so famous that she could make or break her in 1951? Gabriele D'Annunzio, old family friend who hailed her as fashion domina mistress, which also became the name for her first lingerie collection for women. Christened by the man who saw them, let's remember, existing just in function of sterile pleasure they could give him. Sorry, his male protagonists. If D'Annunzio pushed through the thin, pallid beauty to objectify women, what happened to the stocky, dark beauty that still was the mistress of the king? Fat was not desirable, but when did it become actually actively disgusting? You might have heard of Federico Fellini, Italian director so famous for La Dolce Vita that it's taken by foreigners more or less as synonymous with Italian culture itself. In his hailed film Otto e Mezzo, the protagonist is surrounded by a variety of women, and yet the monstrous one that awakens him to sex, as an adult woman to a child, which in no half terms associates disgust with her due to the pedophilia, and she's a stocky woman called La Saranghina, the first in a series of excessive, opulent female figures he employs in his films, portrayed with lustful excess and ridicule, as she is depicted unquestionably as negative, and aesthetically actually a very likely inspiration for the late Divine. Despite establishing her as negative as one can be, Fellini revealed that the foundation of his obsession with immense carnal women was the result of our repressive Catholic education. Yet again, what we are told to see as disgusting, it's actually the fetish and desire of those who depict it as disgusting to justify their dehumanization of the subject to mere objects. That just like for D'Annunzio, lowering his protagonist to the primitive peasant Favretta is part of, makes him recoil and yet want her. And it shows how Fellini's La Saranghina has to have facial expressions similar to a demon and has to rob a child of his virginity, and the priest in the film denounced fully as a she-devil herself, while Fellini secretly actually lusts over women of her appearance. I guess taking away dignity and humanity makes it easier to abuse us, and goes along with one of the most popular insults and demands that fat girls face: the simultaneous Who would ever want you with the requirement of being sexually available, even if and exactly because we are disgusting? Because who else would want you? So if anything, rape is a compliment. The cult and representation of beauty was not in the service of taste, just in the service of power and creating a hierarchy of power. And whereas all women in Italy are judged by misogynistic beauty standards that aim to consume them, even in contexts when it wouldn't be functional, where bella presenza is not needed, like being an assistant professor, and you can bet that the presence of beauty drew a line between consume and abuse. On the race side, Italy's short-lived colonialism during fascism also gave rise to issues related to ethnic superiority that developed into full-blown racism with the election of the non-white Miss Italian in 1996. Whereas Britain and France had seen an influx of people from their former colonies in the 60s, it wasn't until the 80s that Italy faced a change of ethnicity worth noticing. The invasion of Ethiopia was promoted by Mussolini as educative, a peaceful progress in battle against backwardness, disease, and chaos. With the liberation in 1945, Italy's colonies were placed under international jurisdiction, and post-war there was more emigration from Italy than immigration, so no assessment of past responsibilities ever happened. I was never thought about Italian colonialism in school, well into university.
A study from the mid-90s amongst elementary school children, up to 10 years old, in response to the question, "What if your parents were black?" revealed how the children had been raised to naively associate blackness with dirt and evil. If my parents were black, I'd be scared all the time. I would try to paint them with a lighter colour, like pink, so at least they could become of Italian skin.
In this context, skin color, body size, and name revealing of origins are great upfront ways to know if the person in front of you is above or below, if you have to be the victim or can be the abuser. And that's how normal it was in Italy. Fat and mixed race combined. That's me. And I realized at age 13 that I was a guest in Italy. Despite being born, raised, and being genetically half Italian. And if I wanted even just basic respect or a chance for my qualities and skills to be considered for what they were and not just dragged down by my heritage and aesthetic, I had to get out of there. All the while feeling like Italy was right. They had a right to their standard of beauty. And if I wasn't living up to it, well, that was my fault. And I deserved to get the hatred, the derision, the racism of my ex's family, saying that because I was half Egyptian, I was born to manipulate, because they notoriously drive a bargain with all they have in their markets in Cairo. True story. £10, I'll make you a good deal. And being fat, I was lazy. I surely was dirty. I would have been at the same time rejected by anyone, so must be promiscuous and ready to give sexual favors to anyone because I wasn't even pretty, so no one would even want them from me. In this book that I read when I was 15 years old, written by a singer-songwriter from Italy who I looked up to like one would a big brother, he basically paints white cis men around 30 as victims of 16-year-old girls who manipulate them into leaving their wives. And at the time, with my sorry if I exist attitude that I had to have, being a fat, mixed-race kid, I tried to see it as a compliment of girls my age. As in, well, maybe it means that we can be clever in some things. Now, as a 38-year-old woman, I'm pissed off. Because that kind of thinking, that I was worthless, was exactly what led me to accept abusive partner after abusive partner in my 20s. My mother married a man from Egypt in the early 80s. She was the black sheep of the village. I'm still questioning the truth of it, as I've since realized that she's a full-on narcissist, but I was raised with a lot of backhanded awareness about my being non-white. Legend has it that my very white grandparents didn't come to visit me on the first day that I was born. And when they came the second day, being the only non-white baby in the nursery, my nonna said to my mother, See how all the others are white-skinned and more beautiful because of it? Consider that my grandmother, who then became to be the kindest human to me, worked in the fields her entire life. And she wore long sleeves and big hats in the scorching Italian sun of August to avoid tanning. Because at the time, being tanned was a sign of being low class, and it meant that you worked outside. Whereas now, being tanned is desirable because it shows that you can afford to go on holiday. Funny how people's aesthetic tastes change like that. Growing up, my mother used me as a bit of a novelty attraction to her white friends for the way that I was darker as a child, especially in the summer. She was making me show the lines between the back of my hand and the palm. And the story with my grandmother stuck with me. And while my mother wanted me tanned to show me off to her friends, a la Hottentot Venus, I refused to be in the sun for years. If we had bleaching in Italy for the skin, I would have definitely used it. I actually started to dream about the day that I could change my surname to my mother's name, actually better, to my grandmother's, so I would stop having it shouted at me from other children chanting it basically with gorilla sounds. And yet, kudos to my family. My non-whiteness was passed as an afterthought, and the emphasis was put toward my frame. Both my mother and grandmother were quite fat women, but they were both past 50. Therefore, it was acceptable. And yet it was inexplicable to them how cursed I must have been for being fat from the get-going. The fact that my mother was 37 and smoking 2 packs a day of cigarettes while pregnant and gave me numerous genetic defects due to her carelessness during pregnancy, along with feeding me literally bread soaked in vegetable oil and fried after school lunch, never occurred to her at the time as the issue. Throughout my entire teens, it was obvious the issue people took with me was fatness, and the ridicule that came with it. The implication of gluttony, of laziness, of dirtiness. In at least 3 different occasions, from 10 to 19 years old, I was blatantly told by people that they couldn't be friends with me or be seen with me because by being around a fat person, the bullying of our peers would have fallen onto them as well, just by association. The laughing behind the back while you walk, the pig or monkey sounds, the throwing off of food. Of course nobody would want that. My mother had the right feeling. I was a little circus attraction, just as she was showing me off on how my skin could change color and get darker. And the implication going with my looks and heritage would affect all those things I knew I wasn't beautiful enough for, basically everything in Italy. But maybe I could have made up for those in skills, in knowledge. After I moved to Ireland and then the UK, some sort of fascination came about every time that I was going back to Italy. Because despite my looks and heritage, I could speak English fluently. And Italy has a bizarre, inexplicable fascination with foreigners if they come from the north of the world. And English being a language somewhat hard for Italians to pick up, that made me a novelty, but in a positive way for the first time, not in the circus style that my mother used me as. And what about you, my beloved audience? Maybe a lot of these rings true for you and your experience is similar to mine. If you've ever felt unlovable or worthless, I hope this video helps you to realize that no, you absolutely do deserve to be valued and appreciated for who you are, and that fighting for societal change is a worthwhile thing. Maybe none of this applies to you. Maybe you're a cis white male with an athletic build. Well, the truth is that these ideas of what is culturally acceptable affect all of us, whether we are victims or perpetrators of it. And that's because more often than not, what we like, what our preferences are, and what we desire are at odds with each other. There's a lot of conversation right now about whether having a preference for a certain kind of person is prejudiced or not. Whether that's for fat people, people of a different color, trans people, you hear it all the time. I'm not fatphobic, I'm not racist, transphobic, I just have a preference. Well, where did that preference come from? Do you think you were born to only be attracted to skinny white people? Or, you know what, let's use trans people as an example. Let's say you're a cis white male and you meet a woman. She's beautiful, funny, you get on really well with each other, and you click. And then you find out that she's trans. And suddenly you're not interested in her? Why is that? You liked her before. It's not that you aren't attracted to trans women, because you were attracted to a trans woman. So what is it then? Is it what other people will think of you? That you would be embarrassed? Well, then you don't have a preference. Your desires are simply at odds with what society says. People's desires across cultures don't change that much. However, the hierarchy imposed by society contributes to the dehumanization and objectification. Society said I was disgusting with my roles, not deserving of being the object of love. That didn't stop a man from masturbating against my back in a crowded bus in Milan. Just to deny it then and call me a pig because denying my humanity and my identity as a woman justified him for having treated me like a Kleenex, basically. It's no coincidence that the highest searches on Pornhub for interracial and trans porn are in the US states with the strictest laws for trans people or who had segregation. And we know from the history of beauty standards that fatness is not inherently unattractive and undesirable. And yet, in the UK, you have Protein World Get Bitch Body Ready campaign, as if there is an entry requirement on leisure. You may not have fun unless you look like this. So where do these preferences come from? Well, from what we talked about with European white supremacy during the slave trade and people like Berlusconi. These beauty standards come from powerful people desperate to separate themselves and elevate themselves from those they consider beneath them. They desperately need to be definitely better than others. And so what they say is better about them becomes better for all. It creates a standard of aspiration for us. The common folk, oh, if I only look like that or had a girlfriend like that, then I would be like them, at the top of the hierarchy. And so what do? We limit ourselves. We let these unconscious biases dictate our taste and push our real desires aside to bury them under shame. Merriam-Webster defines fetish as a strong and unusual need or desire for something. But we are more likely to use it in these days to mean a sexual gratification for something taboo. So when does a desire for someone like me becomes a fetish? Well, when you stop seeing me as a person and merely an object, or something for gratification. And why don't you see me as a person? Because of a culture that perpetuates the idea that I'm not? If it was socially acceptable to be seen with me in public, would it be fetish then? Does my wife have a fat fetish? Or do I have a trans fetish? No, of course we don't. And in fact, as far as we were aware, we were neither of those things when we met. If you would wank over me, but you wouldn't take me home to meet your parents, then maybe you should ask yourself why that is. Maybe I still haven't convinced you though. Maybe you think that the way culture is right now, it's because of people's preference and they are just better known. And it's like the free market working as it should be, delivering what the people want. Look at social media. That's all based on an algorithm designed to show you what you like, that knows you better than you know yourself, right? Except what social media algorithms do is pick up on those unconscious biases and exacerbate them. If you're subconsciously less likely to click on a black face or a fat face in a thumbnail because your upbringing has taught you that those faces are less valuable than yours, you will be shown less fat and black people on your feed. And even going beyond simply picking on the unconscious, social media platform TikTok was criticized recently for promoting young, skinny and attractive people to the front page, literally manipulating the algorithm to reflect the beauty standard of the owners. Because remember how China was the only country to Photoshop the picture of the girl worse than Italy? And this is a platform that is mostly used by teenagers. Fat phobia is not even recognized as an issue in Italy. A size 44, which is a UK 12, is actually on the hefty size of an ideal that worships size 38, a size UK 6, a 2 US. That's the default good looking, therefore healthy, so bullying and treating fat people as lower should just give them the push to do better and be better, which means be better looking. To the point that bulimia is not recognized as a sickness. When at 16 I was found out binging and purging, my mother brought me to the family doctor we had, which was a friend of the family whose opinion was highly regarded in every direction. She described it in the most disgusting way she could, hoping to humiliate me in front of him. And instead he reacted very calmly, just saying that, well, maybe that could be a way I could lose weight. I just needed to be careful. It says a lot that as a 16-year-old bulimic, I felt empowered, that it sounded like the doctor was actually on my side, and he was held in such high regard. Because of course, everything is worth it to get a normal body in Italy. Belle di Faccia, Face Beautiful, which is now the only project promoting body positivity and reckoning with the rampant fat phobia in Italy, it didn't start until 2018. The only Made in Italy book on the subject of fat phobia is by the two founders and was released only in February 2021. And yet, from the get-go, the main criticism that they received was that posting pictures on Instagram of fat people existing comfortable enough to have their picture taken in any outfit, you know what, including swimsuit or lingerie, it was a promotion of obesity and all the unhealthiness it represents. While there is a conversation happening in the UK and the US about unrealistic body standards, especially when photoshopped to proportions that are physically impossible, in Italy, I don't think anyone says any photoshoots of Vogue, any supermodel picture or sexy calendar focused on the female figure being as naked and as thin as possible would be promoting anorexia. If those detractors can argue that thinness is desirable, but fat isn't on a claim of health, they should disagree with the representation of both extreme thinness and fatness. They don't. Like my doctor, the open unhealthiness of having an eating disorder in the pursuit of a skinnier body was acceptable in the name of thinness. Any further comment on that then becomes hypocritical. Okay, this is a hot topic. I can already see both sides of this argument, and I'm sure that you're already typing furiously in the comments, but just hold that thought for a second. The point of this video is not to say that obesity is good, actually, and it's not to hate on skinny people either. I just want people to feel safe being comfortable in their bodies and not engaging in seriously unhealthy eating habits, like strict dieting to try and become more valuable in society. And on the other side, binging on junk food and takeaway because of bullying and abuse. And I should know, I've done both those things and neither work. Now, one of the issues is that the commodification of even the body positivity movement shifted the responsibility on fat people. Before, it was up to us to lose the weight and become acceptable for the world. Now, it's still sold as if it's up to us to like and love ourselves as we are, to the point that the extreme fringes of healthy at every size take offense and cut off people who for any reason decide to take steps to modify their bodies in a direction that it's not staying fat or becoming fatter. For this reason, you might find it relevant to know that I don't like my body, both for vanity and health reasons. I love to hike. I'm scared shitless of getting the infamous joint pains that any fat person is told that they will get because of their body has to carry so much more weight than is expected, supposedly. And I love extravagant clothing. I grew up reading mangas and they are all pretty, skinny and lanky. Oh, to find, let alone wear clothes the way that I saw my heroines do in Sailor Moon or Gokinjo Monogatari. They hammer it well enough that now that is my beauty standard too. The best thing that I have managed is temporary acceptance if, while waiting, I do everything in my power to address my health issues. I might seem what in fat studies they called a good fatty, and you know what? I need to be that to live with myself, because I don't expect anymore to have to procure any explanation of my fatness to those people who would have been on Fat Logic or the rightfully defunct Fat People Hate on Reddit. For this reason, actually a few years ago, I stood up against one of the main actors in the body positivity movement, when Sofie Hagen launched herself at an awareness campaign by Cancer Research UK that had obesity spelled incompletely, like you'd have it on a cigarette packs when you have to say the dangers of smoking written on it. And as studies did show that obesity was basically a comorbidity, like we saw during the COVID pandemic, at the time, I didn't think that taking it against a cancer charity for stating what studies and numbers proved gave any fat person a good look. We don't need to be in denial. It's not the health issues that we are not aware, and if anything, I welcome learning more of fact-based evidence of issues that, admittedly, I might encounter more likely at my BMI 38 than if I were BMI 25. It might be the good fat in me and for me speaking, but I have no issue in taking on the health criticism. To agree it's true, and fighting that would make me feel hypocritical, like saying BMI is faulty, when the example that we use to prove that is the exception, bodybuilders. But there is still the institutional issue, and that is what we should be focused on fighting. Because taking my size off stores or shaming me in not taking an airplane accomplishes nothing. Guess what? I still need clothes to go outside, nudism will get me arrested, and not making sizes available is the system telling you don't get out of the house because you offend my eyes. One concession that I can make to Sophie now, which I didn't at the time, was context. Taken individually, the campaign is touching a delicate subject, but supported by numbers is telling us the truth. I understand if Sophie's anger was directed at the bigger picture, where all the detractors and critics need to torment us more is a public campaign denouncing obesity as cancer-causing, therefore giving them legitimization in any form of hate thrown at us, which will be then protected very well by such campaign under concern trolling. And the thing is that human beings are very short-sighted. Smoking is a really good example. Every smoker knows that they are damaging their health and are likely to get cancer. And yet, because the cancer exists as an abstract possibility way in the future, people have difficulty in truly accepting the severity. What did work to get people to quit? Increasing the price, because that's a very real impact that affects them now. Similarly with being fat, if you have an emotional dependency on food, like I had, the possibility of getting sick in the future pales in comparison to the hatred and abuse that I have received. And what does that do when I've been working my ass off, literally, to lose weight? It makes me feel like what I'm doing, it's pointless, and that I shouldn't bother because people aren't going to accept me anyway. Bella Di Faccia has a great chapter about the issue and highlights how being body positive doesn't mean one has to love or accept their body, especially at a time when society is still using it as a judgment and a weapon against us. The movement started not to coddle us, but to address the issues that in a society that values thinness, fatness is institutionally fought against. It's in the way that the world is set for specific sizes, and so if your hips are over a certain size, you will not fit on the very specifically sized seats of an airplane, which might sound justifiable to some people thinking, why this fatty has to spill and ruin my flight? Why do I have to be uncomfortable? If she ate so much to spill over, well, it's her fault. Because being fat is always a fault. And that is the judgmental view that needs addressing, especially in Italy, where the fat phobia is ingrained in every aspect of society, where you don't have to wait to travel on an airplane to feel inept. Going to any department store looking for any garment will deliver that to anyone who they are growing past the infamous size 44, a UK 12. There are days that I feel I've been brainwashed because despite knowing what makes a good person has nothing to do with looks when I consider others, I cannot warrant that same kindness to myself. The rejection, the derision, the abuse that I received until I was in my early 20s and then moved abroad, and the otherwise welcoming attitude compared to Italy that the UK and Ireland had towards me, has somehow subconsciously left me with this sense of ineptitude that I feel Italy still makes me feel to this day in the rare occasions when I go back to visit. And how could I not? In 2016, I was fitting in a size 12, so the Italian 44, their version of fat is still, but I was wearing a pair of denim shorts and I was with my partner. A man no younger than 70 felt the need to scream at me in the street, "I would know what to do with those thighs." In 2019, at passport control, a uniformed official felt the need to mock my hair brightness, first directly with me, claiming I was already adorned like a Christmas tree, and then to leave no doubts to what he meant, he turned to his colleague and mimicked a fat person waddling with chipmunk-like cheeks. An official from the border control. The way Italy taught me I was wrong and had to hate myself led me to bulimia the moment I learned you could make yourself vomit. A sickness that is not even considered as such in Italy, because why would you ever not want to do anything that's about trying not to get fat, even if it's about getting food and nutrients out of your body? The eye I look at myself in the mirror with is still painfully Italian. The fact that even when I was a size 12, I was of course still fat while being well under average in the country I actually live, the UK, showed how well the Italian beauty standard indoctrinated me, making me feel like my body dysmorphia was something I needed. Because even if up to my early 20s there were things I liked about myself, rejection, and not just from a relationship, but again, from simple gregarious contexts like my university campus, supported the idea that if there's anything you like in the mirror, you're insane. Because no one agrees with you. Up until I hit a huge wall with my health just about 2 years ago, I still believed the tale of the good fatty, that if you really want to make the effort, you could. You decide to stay in a way society rejects. That is your own fault. I would judge people according to my own meter of comparison, and in no way I could have understood how the bootstraps attitude isn't just a lie in capitalism, but in the matter of body currency too. And yet, even going through health issues that showed my very own self how I could eat nothing and put on weight, did not help. If I at least grew empathy, finally understanding how much of a lie calories in, calories out is, I could not stand that to myself. I still wake up every day feeling like I'm in the wrong body. At times despising myself and ruining days according to what the morning scale said, because if the body I'm stuck into does not convey the qualities we arbitrarily attributed to slenderness, then I'm stuck with the only signifier that I have to show the world in being misread and misinterpreted, misunderstood as lazy, indulgent cow that is making her bed and has to lie in it. Realizing that despite how much I wanted to take responsibility for myself, I would still be judged regardless of my action, just for my looks, is something that I am afraid might never leave me. For full disclosure though, I have to point out that as I come from a line of larger women, part of what Kim Chernin in The Obsession gives as a psychoanalytic reading of fear of fat as based on infantile rage against the all-powerful mother might also apply to me. Recently, as I went past the age my mother was when she had me, having my body remind me of hers has become the most unacceptable thing for me. And I cannot deny that being molested by her is what intrinsically makes me disgusted by a body which, in nakedness, looks like hers, well beyond any standard of beauty I could have ingrained in me by Italian culture. The need to escape looking like my molester is what gives me no chance to live and accept my body to this day. So you see, there are health reasons, but especially mental health reasons why I cannot live in peace with my fat body. And I live with the dissonance every day. And whilst the main fault lies with Italy's inherent sexism, which of course brought the politics of female beauty to be more strict and cruel than other countries, if the media, the shops, the people hadn't been so clear and cruel about what size and what skin and what names are not acceptable, I don't think I would have learned to hate myself so well. And it kills me to think that there is someone like me growing up in Italy still today that could just be exposed to the very same destiny. So what can be done about this issue? Well, it's simple. Representation matters. Not just to be seen in the media, but the signifiers we attach to representational imagery that inform the viewer how to think and how to feel about it. Semiologist Roland Barthes had this to say on the power of images.
We will start by making it considerably easier on ourselves. We will only study the advertising image. Why? Because in advertising, the signification of the image is undoubtedly intentional. The signifieds of the advertising message are formed a priori by certain attributes of the product, and these signifieds have to be transmitted as clearly as possible. If the image contains signs, we can be sure in advertising these signs are full formed with a view to the optimum reading. The advertising image is frank, or at least emphatic.
And so if the message of advertisement is wholly intentional in regards to representation, then what can we say about an image like this? In this advertisement for J'adore by Dior, we have the absolutely outstandingly beautiful Charlize Theron, adorned in gold and jewels, standing in a hallway of equal opulence next to the bottle of perfume. The bottle itself is in the shape of a teardrop, but with the golden color it takes on an almost honey-like appearance. It looks viscous and rich and nourishing. What stands out to me, though, is the way that Charlize Theron's necklace mirrored the rich neck of the bottle. She is the bottle, and the bottle is her. The theme of gold throughout the image signifies wealth and power and exclusivity. It's valuable, she is valuable. And if you own this perfume, you could be like her, you could be desirable, you would have value. But if the bottle represents the epitome of desirability, the value that a woman can have, then what is that shape saying about the feminine body? It has curves. The bottom half is quite wide, and Charlize is standing with her hips tilted to accentuate them and further mirror the bottle. And you could be forgiven for thinking that this promotes an hourglass figure. But it's not an hourglass. It's not the 90-60-90 of the Miss Italia pageant. The neck tapers off. It's slender vulnerability telling you that yes, we want you to be curvy, but you better be as thin as you can possibly be at the same time. This paradoxical relationship between thinness and curviness creates an aspiration for unattainability, a goal that can never be reached. And yet, if you were to stop seeking it, you would be worthless. It doesn't have to be this way. Those same signifiers of opulence, wealth, and power used to be attributed to fatness. And in fact, that's exactly what we are seeing today in Black American culture. Music videos like Cardi B, Wet Ass Pussy, they ascribe the same level of opulence to bigger, non-white female bodies, not as objects of sexual desire, but as beings of sexual power. Is it any wonder then that people like Ben Shapiro spoke so vehemently against this, even to the point of admitting that he cannot sexually satisfy his wife, who is a doctor, because he cannot for 1 second allow for people who don't look like him to have any value in society whatsoever. Now, unfortunately, all of this still works within the framework of and in service of capitalism. But as much as we might hate to admit it, capitalism is what we have. And while we fight the good fight, we still have to act within the frameworks that exists right now to elicit the change that we want to see. As mentioned before about the unconscious bias affecting social media algorithms, you can change this by finding fat or people of color or both kind of creators, watching their contents and listening to what they have to say. If you're here watching this fat, queer, mixed race woman, hey, maybe expand. Check your YouTube subscription. And if it's just white, cis, skinny people, maybe get out of the box to include amazing people such as Kat Black or Khadija Mbowe, Tinoir, who actually, it was her skinny propaganda video that made me realize how Italy was terrible at institutionalized fatphobia and needed to be denounced for that. Maybe get over the standard that other men have decided you need to follow and recognize as valuable, when really it's only valuable to them, when whiteness, skinniness, gender conformity, they all serve a system that oppress all that are not cis white men. While capitalism still exists, we need to express, even as consumer, that this is not what we want. Corporate pride shows the system listens to what the people want, even if it's just to make money out of us. And much as Jerry Jones becoming the first black plus-size trans model on a Calvin Klein billboard is still on a wall to sell as a product in function of capitalism, giving a face and image to blackness, to fatness, transness, as legitimate enough to be on a public billboard rather than your dirty little secret being fetishized, these are the possible steps to take, given the consumerism culture we are in. Until we can revolt and subvert, these are the little things making a difference towards normalizing and accepting what today is just seen as the different, because of how strongly ingrained a sense of normality has been arbitrarily created by the patriarchy. When I started being on YouTube, it was 2010. I ran a music channel dedicated to acoustic sessions, and while at the beginning I was on camera introducing the sessions, the amount of comments that I got along the lines of, "Who cares about your fat face? Just get us to the band we came to see, please." I retreated in silence and anonymity. I focused everything on the music, and I just replaced my presence with graphics and titles. Because no one wants to see a fat cow while watching cool, sexy, glamorous artists, right? A similar lamentation was brought to me in my second YouTube venture, a channel dedicated to low-carb food and nutrition science. Despite the natural association that goes with diets and weight loss, my channel was focused on health, independently of weight. Sure, a lot of people came to it for weight loss, but those who stayed, like me, for over 8 years, had to for health reasons, usually diabetes and such. Though what a failure was I seen as to be a fat woman running a food channel. The detractors alternated between shut up, smile and cook when I was using my platform to support causes like trans rights and Black Lives Matter. And then when I cooked or shared scientific information, they shouted at me because what does a fat woman want to tell me about my health? You're clearly not healthy. And that's despite that, given the subject of the channel, me constantly being able to prove that actually I was healthy. That was never the point. That was never the point, was it? Health is the excuse for concerned trolling against a woman owning a business about something she shouldn't dare speaking about. Which showed with the gym bros loudly claiming beyond fatness that as a woman I couldn't understand or speak science and I needed to be wrecked. When actually doing experiments that brought new discoveries to the entire community. This time, I didn't step back. Every time I posted in support of Black Lives Matter, trans rights, anti-Trump and pro-vaccines, I lost more and more subscribers. And you know what? I was glad about that, because the way those people want to uphold privilege against growth and solidarity is not something that I want to support and give tips on longevity and health so that they can continue with the discrimination much longer. No, thank you. Which brings us onto this channel. A platform that I will build in service of social change and bringing forward unrepresented voices. If you're unfamiliar with the term BreadTube, well, It's listed on Wikipedia as being a term used to refer to a loose and informal group of online content creators that provide editorial opinions and educational lectures from socialist, communist, anarchist, and other left-wing perspectives. And by the way, it's named after Kropotkin's The Conquest of Bread, the most prominent of which, of course, you surely already know: Natalie Wynn, ContraPoints, Lindsay Ellis, Harry Brewis, H. Bomber Guy, Abigail Thorne, Philosophy Tube, and Sean. All of which are white. And this has been a consistent criticism, apparently, of the BreadTube movement, especially when you have creators like Kat Black, who have made significant contributions without anywhere near the same level of success. If you follow any of these people, then it will be no surprise to you watching this that they have been a great source of inspiration for this channel and the design of the content. But the inspiration for this video in particular, and to start this channel, comes from Khadija and T, two fantastic black queer female creators leading the push for more inclusivity and better representation, not just on this platform, but in the media as well. While I've always looked up to the Big Five, I never felt like I had anything worthwhile to say myself, because the thing they spoke about from a perspective of a relatively white, thin privilege, I was glad to learn, but I didn't feel like I had anything to add on to. With Khadija and T, however, I finally had creators talking about the things that I always felt were significant, and yet thought that they must have been irrelevant if no one cared to talk about them. And honestly, it shouldn't have taken them to do it, to push me to do it as well. But if I can do that for someone else, if I can actually make one person feel like they matter, like what they have to say matters, then I've done my job. Welcome to Them for the House.